There you go.
There we go. Okay. John, Callie, thank you for having me here. I'm John Joergensen from Rutgers Law School, and I'm here to talk about the Harvard Case Access Project. It is now unchained.
Unconstrained.
It's now unconstrained. And so for those of you not familiar with it, what I thought I'd do for this session is just talk about it, talk a little bit about the history of it to give some context. And then what I was planning on doing is just talking about what I'm doing and what I want to do with this collection of materials, and then open it up for a general discussion about the collection and what can be done with it, what libraries might want to do with it, or anybody who wants to be like a library. And I'll get on my normal, like what is now a 20-some-odd-year-old soapbox of libraries owning digital materials. So, and I don't know, not everybody here knows me. So I've worked at Rutgers since '97 as a librarian, and my tenure projects to earn tenure there all involved digital library projects. So my first thing was to make a deal with the New Jersey court so I could get access to their dial-in bulletin board system and download their WordPerfect documents as they came out with new decisions. That's changed a lot. In fact, they just went to JSON, so it's really cool now. But I've been publishing legal decisions ever since '97. We also do administrative law decisions. Once the New Jersey lost its print publisher when the West Publishing Company bought it, we started becoming their publisher, and then Westlaw and Lexis started jumping in on it when we got a lot of usage. And we now do the New Jersey State Code called the Laws of New Jersey. And we also have ethics decisions, a great deal of federal congressional materials, and a whole scattering of other stuff, a lot of material. So that brings me to the Harvard Case Access Project. For my interests, I've been trying to publish the decisions of the state of New Jersey since '97. They gave me access to the bulletin board, which had everything from, say, the beginning of 1997. At this point, it's quite useful. It's a deep collection now, but it's not nearly everything. And so the dream was always to get that back file one way or another. We've thought about scanning it and the technology of stripping out things like headnotes. And, you know, it's me and a couple of people helping me. So that kind of thing was never going to happen. And then a few years ago now, Harvard was given a multi-million-dollar grant to scan all of American case law using the extra copies of every single American case reporter that they have in their possession, which is Harvard, all of them. And they ended up with, was it 7.4 million documents? They have it on their website, and you can look it up, but it's over 7 million documents from all over the country, going back to whatever colonial reporters they have through, I believe it's 2019. So there's your back file right there. So Suzanne Wones, who is the executive director of the library, they went to Ravel Law, which most of you might be familiar with. They came out with a company, Ravelol, which has since been purchased by LexisNexis and is part of the Lexis system. And they put things together with great care to quality. They have fantastic metadata. They had fantastic quality control as they did OCRing on everything that they scanned. They got large scale commercial quality scanning equipment that was highly accurate and fast. In fact, I saw it when they first bought the stuff. The scanner was about as long as this table and this presentation board put together. Everything just ran through. Industrial strength machines. But that collection came with strings attached. And they weren't allowed to release it to the general public. You could get at the metadata. Some states you were allowed to look at, the small states without much stuff, without much demand for it. But it was a time-limited restriction that Ravel had put on it. And as of last March 1st, all of those restrictions have expired. And it's now all available for bulk download with all of its metadata, all in nice, neat, good quality JSON formats. And that's why it is now Unchained. So what is available? How do you get it? There we go. So the URL is real easy, case.law to get to their main web page. Case.law/case law will show you every single reporter they've got. And I won't keep scrolling down the list. And then for each reporter, you can click on bulk data. And clicking over here will give you individual HTML files, and you can go through and look at all of them. Actually, let's look at one of them. Looks very bare bones. From my point of view, as somebody who does digital collections, I look at it as extraordinarily clean. It's simple, it's straightforward, it's very easy to put a style sheet on and make it look however you need it to look. But it is all there and all available. Now, that was just looking at one thing. The zip file is something else, which I'm not going to download, but that zip file will include every single case that's in that volume with all of its associated metadata. Download it, and you've got it all there. And again, the metadata is all in simple JSON. Well, you know, JSON simple. Yeah, simple. And it can all be down in zip files. You can write a script which will download the whole reporter, which will download all of the reporters for each one of the states, etc. It doesn't take a long time. You can get it in PDF as well as HTML. If you just want to look at it, you can browse it as much as you want. And it's all just there. So, it worked. I did not expect it to. So as far as the metadata is concerned, let's see if we can read this on the screen. For every volume. I don't know, is everybody here familiar with, anybody not familiar with JSON at all? No one's willing to raise their hand. Okay. So fairly simple. Volume number. So this is volume 56 of the Ohio app third. So publication year, volume, pretty much everything you need is there for the volume. But then the really interesting stuff is the case metadata. Good long name, a name abbreviation, which is pretty much in Blue Book format, a decision date in ISO format, docket number, first page, and it's all coming from the volume metadata says it's volume 56. This is in fact page 1 of volume 56. You get the site as well as the page metadata there. You get a proper Blue Book style abbreviation. It's all there for you to build an easy database of the decisions you've downloaded. But even more than that, so, and again, the jurisdictions there, Ohio, and then there is the secret stuff, which I'm not sure if Ravel wants anybody to know about, but it's not a laser pointer, is it? Oh, yeah. Square bracket and the thing cites to. So why am I excited about that, John?
No idea.
Every single case that is cited in this case is now going to be listed one after the other. So within, let's go up. So within the case, Barker et al. Versus Dayton Walther Corporation, that document cites to, starting out with 586 Pacific 2nd 564. Now it doesn't have the name. It doesn't have the name because what they're doing was scanning for citations and lifting them out and then making a JSON entry of what they found for each one of them. So perfect, not necessarily perfect, but easy enough. And we can talk about this more in a second, what can be done with it. But it cites to that, got the reporter, page numbers, and just to be pedantic about it here, the cites to section, you see it starts with a square bracket, and that's going to go on for quite a while before that square bracket gets closed. What you see right underneath the square bracket is the tag cite, and then we've got the cite going on and on and on and on and on until we get a closed bracket here for the cite. It opens here and closes here. And then we get a new one opening, and then we get cite coming in with a Cal Reporter citation, and then another one, and then another one for Northwest 2nd, one to the Michigan Reporter, one to Northwest 2nd. I can go on, but what's important, and then it's got a Shaw 256 string, which is a digital signature for the original document, so you can make sure that it's authenticated against the original. And provenance data, all good. What can be done with this? For myself,
Build a tree.
you can build a tree. You can, if you can find somebody who can show you how to get GraphDB or a triple store up and running, you can just load it because it's in JSON format. JSON, a graph database will just slurp this stuff up. Gotten GraphDB to slurp it all up. I'm having trouble writing SPARQL things right now, but that's my fault. I'll figure it out. But it'll all be there, and then you can traverse the triples of all the citations. And then you can build what Ravelaw made. I don't know how much money they made when they sold out to Lexis. But this is their data. And it was compiled by Harvard, and it's available right here for free for anybody who wants to download it and do something interesting with it. Of course, I was talking about earlier with what else you can do with this as well. So if you have, let's get a nicer one. 419 Michigan 356. Of course, if you've also downloaded all of the Michigan cases, that's going to map to the actual case metadata, including the caption in the document for that as well. So once you've downloaded all of the citation data, if you've got all the metadata for the initial cases, it is not incredibly complex to link that all together and have an interactive system. Yeah.
Yeah, isn't there part, is the JSON file, doesn't it contain the text, the opinion itself as well?
No, it's got the metadata.
Okay.
And so this case metadata, I've scrolled down to, where is, so date added, and, oh, I just took a snippet of one case. It's got all the cases in the reporter in one incredibly long collection. And then it's just a question of parsing it out. But the text of the document is not in there. That's the HTML file. And again, that's not such a bad thing in this case, particularly because the HTML is really, really clean. And so the HTML document is easy to deal with for its own purposes. You can style it. You can also take all of this metadata and then stick it in the HTML files as meta tags so that when your database eventually craps out and fails, you don't lose the metadata and can recreate your database, or vice versa. Any questions about JSON or metadata at this point? You look like you're thinking about it. Okay, so what can be done with this? You can just download it and have a copy. Just stick it on a hard drive, and then your institution has a copy of all American case law in digital format for free that you can just have, even if you do nothing with it. Personally, one of the things that I'm always obsessed about as a librarian is the ability of digital data to survive in the long run. And it's something we used to talk about in the early 2000s when this room actually would have been much fuller. And we would talk about how to back it up onto disks and do all kinds of things with it. But what we really need to do is share it with each other and just download it. Otherwise, it's not going to survive. And here's my general thing that I always talk about, so I have to because I'm obsessed, is the idea of apparent distribution and real distribution in the internet age, of course, is that when we used to collect books, which we have stopped doing, at least with, well, definitely with reporters nowadays, is instead of having thousands of copies of the paper reporters all over the country and the world, we now have a few digital sources that have their material locked up. And the they're all businesses, and there's no problem with them being businesses and making a profit and having a profit motive, except when you start worrying about long-term preservation and archiving, because it doesn't make anybody money to have an archive when you have 5 or 6 commercial databases out there that are of varying costs to access. So they will disappear at some point, maybe not in the near future, but at some point. And who's going to do a goddamn thing about it? Nobody but librarians. So we don't think about that anymore because university IT has taken over everything and we don't have disk space anymore. But it's still something to consider and think about. And it's HTML. It doesn't take up that much space, really. One of the problems that I've had to deal with every now and again as a librarian is the move to quantitative studies and people wanting a large corpus of material such as case law in order to do complex searches and queries and looking for all kinds of things and tagging it in different ways. Well, here's the collection, download it. And then you can have the scholars in your institution do whatever they need to do. And you can parse it and hack it up any way you want. Because once you've downloaded it, it's yours. And of course, you can make a repository of free stuff for your public. So as far as me, I've talked about it already. I'm going to complete the New Jersey case law collection. I'm going to expand and integrate all 50 states with an integrated search. I'm going to integrate the citations with it into, and all of the stuff that I've got are already hypertext links with all of their citations. It's a huge hack, but it works, and it works quite nicely. But now it's going to be integrated with all 50 states. And again, I've talked about graphing databases to have pre-programmed SPARQL queries so that you can do things like have your own good citator. This is the data, of course, that Ravellaw is using, as far as I can tell. And if you want to make a citator out of this data, you can make a citator out of this data. Traversing it also gives you all kinds of possibilities to do sophisticated analysis. But on the simple level, if you've got a citation for a document you've got, and everything is in a triple store, you can query toward the future and get every case that cites the case you've got. You can also bring up all of the cases that your case cites, and then it can traverse and bring the whole collection together for you and give you that bubble search that Ravel does so well on Lexis. Why not? So limitation is it does stop at 2019. For New Jersey, I have access to the New Jersey courts system. By the way, anybody who wants it can get it as well. There are places like Justia, one of the sponsors of Cali. Build your own scraper, use Court Listener. You could try and convince some tech-oriented law school organization to obtain a current feed from a commercial organization that is willing to sell you a current feed for reasonable prices.
Keep it up.
John?
To keep it up to date.
To keep it up to date, yeah. So do your own jurisdiction, download everything, but just do your jurisdiction, make yourself popular in your state. And what you can also do is just own your law. And yeah, this is mostly self-explanatory. The one thing I'll talk about, though, is one problem that I have always had as a personal hassle with organizations like AALL. When places like Rutgers started publishing databases of law cases, and I'm not saying it's because a giant proportion of, a minority, but a giant proportion of the members of AALL work for Lexis and Westlaw. Got nothing to do with anything, I'm just saying. They started immediately having little committees that talked about authentication and coming out with authentication problems and saying who's official and who's not official so that things can be trustworthy, even though Lexis and Westlaw have never done anything along the lines of authentication. But then all of a sudden it was an issue. So what do we have here now? We have stuff that's produced by the #1 law school in the country, except for WashU. And everything is documented with identifying metadata, technical metadata, and good quality digital signatures for every single element of it. And it's Harvard. So is this trustworthy data, even if you've downloaded a copy? Yeah, it's really good stuff. And with the digital signatures, you can prove that it's good stuff directly from Harvard. So what do we do from here? Yeah.
So use it as a training set for an LLM.
Use it as a training set for an LLM, absolutely, because it's got everything in it.
I don't know what kind of question you would ask, but case law.
What does anybody ask case law, right? Well, a specialized LLM will give you specialized answers. And so there's an element of error and noise, if I can borrow from the previous speaker, that will be eliminated if you create an LLM from special material. So it's worth doing. And I mean, it's what Lexis and Westlaw have done with their search engines, as far as they have actually implemented LLMs into their search, which, you know, they have. Interestingly enough, I was at a brief, like one-day conference at Harvard when to celebrate the unchaining of their case access material. And at a roundtable discussion, there was the idea of, okay, it's open now and everybody can download it. Wouldn't it be great if everybody downloaded it? And it was interesting that there were immediate objections about things like version control and things like people abusing the material, which are real objections and they are real worries. But within the academic community, quite frankly, I'm not sure how legitimate most of those problems are. But the idea of institutions cooperating with each other to check their material with each other to ensure authenticity is not a bad idea. That is something that's been done before. That's something that people will continue doing. We could do it. There is the lock system. And again, we'll be preserving the law. And that is all I have prepared as far as a presentation goes, because one of the main things I wanted to do, and maybe it's a bad thing we've got so few people here, maybe it's a good thing we've got so few people here, but what can we do with this material? I've just talked about what it is and what I plan on doing it with it. What do other people want to do with it? Elmer's not here. Has Elmer downloaded it all?
Oh, yeah. Well, I'm sure he did. I don't know if he told him.
Well, the obvious thing from speaking as Mr. Kelly, which I hate that, I shouldn't call myself that. But speaking from Kelly's viewpoint, I want to turn it into education. I know, Justin and court listener have had lots of, there's way more than lawyers downloading case law. But it tends to be concentrated in the, something that hit the news, Trump's indictments and stuff like that. There might be some long tail value in when the Supreme Court put out their stuff, oh, they overturned Roe v. Wade, then a bunch of people wanna see that in the case law or the case chain and might read that for their own edification. So it's not clear what you can do with just case law, because people need it explained to them. And that leads me into the whole access to justice aspect. It would be great if the public understood where the laws of our land come from and how we get to where we are with what we have. But probably reading the original case material isn't the best way to do that for them. But having it all available to the public for the first time for free, not the first time,
Yeah,
it's one of those sort of like about time that, I remember these conversations literally 30 years ago, 1994. When there was a nascent consortium of law libraries trying to each one take an appellate district and post cases. What was that called? The legal,
I don't know. There's been a couple, and
Keith Mortensen and Bill Miller, Larry Downey reached out, and a bunch of others.
yeah, it wasn't quite ready yet.
No.
Of course, the really hard thing is once people move on or retire, it's very difficult to have somebody take over these projects.
Yeah, and you only touched on it briefly in your first opening remarks. That libraries should have been thinking about it themselves as legal publishers right from the start.
Yeah.
I mean,
What's the difference between a publisher and a library in the internet age?
yeah.
It's your attitude.
I mean, my ancient story goes back to 1988. Jesus. So we just started giving Lexis to all the law students. They all got floppy disks with their own Lexis passwords on them, so they could go home and do Lexis searches, through a modem, which is pre-internet, pre-even networks. But in conversations with the legal research instructors, they're like, well, now the students are like out there unfettered doing these searches. We would like to see what the students are typing into those searches so that we could see the types of mistakes that students are making and, formulate education around that. And so the conversation, and I know this is 35 or 40 years ago, but the conversations with Lexis were like, we're not going to do that.
Yeah.
That's the equivalent of like going to Google and saying, when people search for case law, what do they type in? I know you can get some of that, if Google's, willing to filter some of that down. But
No, that's worth too much money.
that's worth that's worth too much money, and they said privacy. There's no privacy in educational sort of things like that.
But with this stuff, you can still do, I'm looking at the citation data because this kind of stuff is very hard to get and it's been quality controlled, which is lovely. Right, and I'm sure it's not 100% accurate. So talk about, our previous presenter. Right, it's really useful. It's not going to be perfect, but it's really useful. It immediately made me think of my legal process course in law school and how to trace back the origin of a doctrine. And how do you do that? Well, one of the main ways of doing that, and I don't know if anybody's had to take this course, was it The Foundations of Legal Process, is the classic textbook on it, or just Legal Process? I can't remember the author. It's not going to come to me in time. But the classic set of things is the Kentucky privacy cases. Anybody familiar with them? Okay. So I can't remember enough details to really, I'll do my best here. In the middle of the legal process textbook, they've got about 5, 6, 7 cases all listed back to back. And one of the most instructive parts of the case books is reading through this series of cases from the Supreme Court of Kentucky. The original one is a case that rejects a tort because it's not really defamation. It's only an invasion of privacy, and there's no such thing as a right to privacy in the state of Kentucky. And then a case after that with better, more sympathetic facts, talking about how it's a shame that there's no right to privacy in Kentucky. And we would like to make this some kind of tort, but we don't have any precedent for that. And you can see it going along, and then you see I think it's Oliver Wendell Holmes writing a law review article talking about the fact that there should be a right to privacy, and it's kind of implied in our tort law. So we should recognize a right to privacy. And then all of a sudden, the Supreme Court of Kentucky is really stretching the facts of cases in order to say something really is a tort, when the facts of the case at the current bar are really very similar to the case from before that had no right to privacy and therefore no action. And then at the end, after a course of, I think, 70 years, the Supreme Court of Kentucky looks at the whole stream of cases and says, we now have a right to privacy. And there it is. Can you do that kind of instruction using the tools that are actually available in this collection of case law? When you can take a case that's on a point that you've discovered and be able to trace all the citations backward in time and forward in time easily and quickly, because it's all just coded there for somebody to stick in a database and allow you to do the query. Oh, yeah.
So I can word search with your database?
My database, yes. And for, every IT department has websites. Every website has its search engine, and every kind of search engine can be segmented to search a collection of material, whether it be Elasticsearch, Lucene, or I use an old one that's just worked really well for me called Swishy. But yeah, you can do it. Even more than that, you can also just do tracing a chain of citations backwards and forwards as well. You can do both at the same time. More complex, but not impossible to do.
So it would be useful when the Supreme Court is very big on original intent. And the original intent that they're finding on a lot of cases is different than the original intent I'm finding on a lot of cases. But you have a more complete database. If I could word search, for example, bribery of legislators. Did they really mean back in the colonial days, oh, you could bribe any legislator, give him anything you want as long as there wasn't a quid pro quo? Did they really mean that?
Mm-hmm.
If I had that ability to go back to those old cases, those colonial times cases, then I would be able to formulate the correct impression of what's happening.
Yeah, my only quibble with what you've just said is the word "my database." Because it's yours too. And you can download it this afternoon if you want to. Which is kind of my point too. Quibble, but trying to make a point, so I'm giving you a hard time for no good reason. But yes, you can do all of this. And then you can chop it up any way you feel you need to do it. And you don't have to worry about any restrictions that Lexis or Westlaw may put on what kind of searches you're doing and how many you're doing. And whether you want to do a series of, say, automated searches that repeatedly go through something looking for different kinds of data. And you have somebody who can program a little bit, who can construct a script that'll do 10,000 searches on material.
And the day will come when I can use AI to do my searches for me. Even more specific.
Yeah, well, I have my own feelings about AI, but in theory, yeah. Yeah.
Let's say, so a couple things that will one, first, everybody should get the latest updates for the last 5 years. So, get the ones who get but neither of those have like the full final phone version. So you gotta figure, somebody needs to figure that out. But that's just something, so it's not what this is about how with all the information that's as far as things you can use with it, the law space, one, you could take copies of the cases coming in, so they type back to the code section, the regulations, start running it. So when something new comes in, start indicating stuff. Which is important, especially in state laws, because most state laws aren't the law, they're just legislative intent. State secretary is the law, right? Regardless of the city. So I think there's some stuff that can be done there as an academic project, where students are being involved with both of the archive to sort of bring in that organization, but also stuff forward and helping with both the school and state and being on top of what the codes are. All schools with your a good way for them to practice. The other item, so the bigger item is we do, AI is not great at it, but it's pretty good summarizing stuff. It summarize the decision, the consent, concurrences. But it's also good at finding different topics and issues. So you can start running that, and AI is going to keep what you go. And you can start running cross cases, maybe the legal issues. You can start then providing mapping legal issues, sort of tying how cases work together, and start doing more. It'd be more like the West Penal system. When you're using AI and start using this in math, you can sort of start doing it that helps you go in different directions. And also you have a set of legal issues you can look at across everything. And now you can do your searches. You can search over the cost of the case, the full text, but also about the legal issues involved in that case. And then tie that in a little bit in terms of things that have been overturned, or things that have been supported on a regular basis. Again, I think that's relatively important to be right now, because to me, that important system is going to all in flux, because I don't think started cycle. We'll see what the chat out. We're going to have one chaos. But that would be another way to sort of play with this. But if you're a school and you have your own copy, maybe you can focus in on your own statements, at least persuasive arguments, most of so you have your own full set there. And that can be something that schools can work together. Separately, I think all the schools can get different copies everywhere. There should be a way when someone finds a mistake or a typo, that the schools could have a login, they could go and they could make a suggestion to the original copy someplace, or someone else to do. And anyone could come in from the school, and then we have to be checked by the editorial against the school copy. But that would be normal. That's just a good point. That's that much. But I think there's a lot of stuff you can do with it in schools that from a learning perspective with the film. I think it takes place some places, but I don't think schools are focused on as much about Well, they can improve the overall research tools for everyone, and then they can bring it.
Well, one of the things too, to just kind of riff on the theme of AI being a good summarizing machine. That's good for so many things. I mean, one of the things that's just fantastic about the commercial services is they give you a keyword in context display. They can also give you a nice little summary that is off, well, in this material is not available at all in the raw data. But just for the purposes of searching and finding the law, having a workable summary in your search results is an incredible help and is worth a lot of, well, it's extraordinarily worthwhile. And then once you've got them, you can do other things with those summaries as well. You know, you can start, I mean, and starting to lift out things like categories and keyword topics and listing them together, and then start making a controlled, what is going to be eventually a controlled language vocabulary to guide people in finding relevance is something we don't want to think about anymore, because we think AI is just going to do it for us. But AI can help us put it together and then use it. Yeah.
So there are multiple companies, I'm not gonna name any, that sell canned case briefs. And I know that there's a couple who are experimenting, or and not just experimenting, but actually selling the idea that go and search a case there, within a day you'll get an AI generated case brief of that case as part of your subscription. In other words, they don't want to spend the money to run ChatGPT summarizations or OpenAI, against 80 million cases or something like that.
The one that the pricing of OpenAI, it's already fallen from $60 to input at one point. I think for output per million, total is like $750,000.
Right.
Now it's $2.50, and that's fallen. It's going to fall, and I'm going to be worried about AI costs to text now. AI is going to be moving on video, and they're going to replace, the movie stars. That's where the cost is. The text is going to go pretty soon and free. And as far as like, if you want to summarize the case record, we do that with graphs and stuff on cases that we do. There was that on the preview that we shared. Your cost is almost nil. So the ability to go back and do that file on it, especially if it's possible, I think it's going to keep going down. As long as Google is putting pressure on Microsoft, on price competition, then I think it'll just keep going down until they want to grab on issue until they figure out the real application for it. But that stuff is going to keep going forward. This is a simple application that anyone can like.
Well, yeah, summary of the case, sure, except the places where I'm seeing value getting added, or at least attempts at getting value added, is I don't want a summary of a case. I want you to do the IRAC analysis of the case, which is not a summary and much harder for a general purpose AI to do, maybe impossible. But not hard if you were to, if this was a research project, think Hugging Face or open source models.
Bring more examples. The issue there is well, too many issues. Like you don't want to need the issue of okay, it's incredible purpose, but I mean that's the issue pops up every time.
Yep.
Yeah, you're getting to the point there, John, where it's judgment is creeping in when you start doing IRAC, right? And that's the thing that ChatGPT is terrible at.
Case needs for law school. What the case meant was exactly what 50 different things.
Yep.
Interesting lawsuit. But that's fine. It's still new. It's just going to take more time and training. And yeah, it's as good as the data with the training. It's just one of them. Just going to try to compensate that. So
yeah. Well, we did some experiments against our casebook, right? So a casebook is an edited down version of a collection of cases. and commentary written by the law instructor. And our very specific goal was, okay, so I've got an 800-page torts case book. You know, give me 100 multiple choice questions. You know, with halfway decent, what's the word? Wrong answer, distractors and things like that. And it was pretty rough. Partly because the Gen AI, the general purpose AIs, you know, read torts cases about, you know, kids dying from a vaccine and asked a whole bunch of chemistry and biology multiple choice questions. Because they thought that must be what this is about, not about the law.
That's part of the. It's got to bring up the data.
Exactly.
A lot of data, give them some example tests from the past, and then they'll say, but if you do some general GPT, of course, then it's just general, it's really not.
And
All right, well, you know, it was a back of the envelope sort of,
I think it'll also just do better. I don't know how much better it would actually do. The fact that it would do better is exactly what we were talking about just earlier, John. Is that a large language model trained on just legal material is going to be far more useful than ChatGPT will ever be for legal research, right? Because it's going to be trained on lifting out all of these topics and not what everybody else wants to talk about. But at the same time, how good is it going to be doing on making judgment calls? I would never trust AI in its current form or its next two forms to do IRAC. I just won't. And I'm pretty sure I'm right about that. And to give good false answers in a multiple choice is a very similar proposition. But it'll get you close.
right, and for education purposes,
It'll make it much faster to do a good true or false or multiple choice test.
for education purposes, even if you could generate bad case briefs or bad multiple choice questions, you could flip that around to the students as, so here's a bunch of poorly generated case briefs and multiple choice questions. Tell me what's wrong with that. In other words, you teach the problem rather than present the problem, the output from the AI.
And then LRW becomes that's a good value add to an LRW course.
Yeah.
So you want to use AI? Here.
There's some crap.
Are you going to be able to rely on this? And here's why it went wrong. Like it. Any other questions? I hope this was interesting. We're almost out of time, so I think we can leave 3 minutes early. Thank you all very much.